My name is Roop Singh, and today we're not going to talk about AI or data or blockchain. I mean, you've heard that stuff all day, 2 days. I'm sure you're bored by now. And if I bore you further, there is some whiskey or vodka for you in the back. We specifically chose that room for that purpose. You know that, right? So, for those who don't know me, here's a quick background. I'm not going to go over it, but just take a quick look and then we can move on. So, without talking about data and blockchain and AI, let's talk about something you all like. Do you like movies? Anybody like movies here? All right, wonderful. Let's talk about movies then, shall we? Did you know that the earliest movies were silent? They were captured mostly using hand-cranked cameras. Remember that? The first motion picture camera was invented by Thomas Edison and William Dixon in 1891. It was called the kinematograph. Early films were often shown in private settings, just like these. The Lumiere brothers in France pioneered public film screenings in 1895. Editing was very basic. Most shots were single takes, long single takes. And then came sound. Did you know that Warner Brothers first released the feature-length sound film called The Jazz Singer? When? In 1927. Sound on film, like you know today, wasn't invented then. Sound was in fact initially recorded on separate phonographs and then synced with the film during projection. Later, the sound on film technologies like Vitaphone were developed where the sound was directly recorded onto the film. And then came color. The iconic movie Wizard of Oz, 1939, showcased the possibilities of color. And 1930 saw widespread adoption of color films with Technicolor leading the way. And then came, jumping a few decades on, home videos. You remember those cassette tapes and VCRs in the 70s and 80s? The medium of recording movies, visual and audio, changed. And so did change the business models. So did change the distribution of films. That was a major shift. And then jumping a few decades ahead, we got to digital cameras. The transition from analog film to digital filmmaking began in the 20th century with movies like Star Wars, Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, being shot almost entirely on video, on digital cameras. And then came CGI, computer-generated graphics, around the same time. Remember Jurassic Park? How iconic and well-adopted that film was? And then moving on, you know the story. Then came CDs and DVDs and Blu-ray. What's changing here? The medium to capture an immersive experience. A shift in replication and storage and distribution of that media allowed for new and different business models. And then let's come to today, and came streaming, something you are now immersed in. Netflix, Prime Video, Apple TV, take your pick. So what was it? Was it just one technology that enabled the experience that you live today in your homes, in your car, on the airplane? It was advances in camera technology, sound recording, special effects, distribution methods that evolved to bring us the current state of the world, your current immersive experience, and the shift in business models and markets in an industry. So you get the story. It's a story of tech-enabled evolution, leading to scaling of distribution, new markets, business model. It's not just one technology that produced this. It's a synchronization of multiple different techniques, technology, concepts that arrived us here. It's a wave of different technologies. So now, let's look at 3 waves. Artificial intelligence, blockchain, the ubiquitous nature of data. And let's ground ourselves in few terms so that we are all clear in this room what I mean by those. What is blockchain to me? It's a secure, immutable, encrypted, trustworthy, decentralized mechanism to share data. And for this discussion, I will include the functionality of smart contracts, which are essentially automated programs triggered by certain conditions or events. AI is a set of tools to generate cognition and decision making. And then data, that's the blood that runs through their veins, is the fuel that runs these engines to produce some relevant outcomes. And then what is disruption finally? Disruption to me is making the current model obsolete, as you saw in various waves of technologies in movies. So how are these different ways collaborating or enhancing each other? One simple way to look at AI plus blockchain is that blockchain can allow to record the decisions, the choices that AI systems are making. A lot of times these decisions are not apparent. But now, given that we can record this in a secure, trustable way, we can then go back and audit those decisions and learn further from those decisions. That's one view. Here's another view. If you look from a meta vantage point, where are we going? What is the equation? So the way I see it is the following. You have questions that you can ask for a context. You heard all day today and yesterday about various use cases. People are using data and AI to solve problems, right? That's the context of a question or a set of questions being asked. And what does it need? It needs two basic elements. It needs relevant, usable data. We'll look into that. And it needs a cognition or a learning model, what folks are calling here LLM, right? Together, they lead to a relevant outcome. So why are we discussing this? You know this stuff already. You've heard it all day. The question I am more interested in is who's going to win? What is the game theoretic aspect of this evolution? How are companies playing with each other? Who's competing? Who's cooperating? Where are the winners? We can solve for problems. Yes, great. Who's the winner? And as you think about those questions, let's talk about the two factors I said. Relevant, usable data. What does that mean? If the data is irrelevant for the questions you're asking, let's take some use cases. I want to predict the price of real estate in Copenhagen, in Medellin, or here in Atlanta. I need a set of historical data and a lot of other demographic factors, economic factors to feed into a particular learning model to output some results of what the prices might be, say, in this Midtown zip code. You get the point. Or take another example. This is an example of structured data. Let's look at an example, use case of unstructured data. What could that be? Let's do some sentiment analysis on social media networks to predict where the next elections might be, or to predict how the stock market might perform. That's an example of unstructured data, being the social media channels and social media conversations. Now, all of this seems interesting, but if there is no relevant and usable data, then the models can't learn anything. And I think that's part of the issue. A lot of the conversations today you've heard about semantics and semantic layers, right? So if you look at structured data, I think the problem that we as people and as corporations have created for ourselves are various schemas. Go back to when Lotus was invented, right? When relational databases were invented, when RDBMS was, the first thing ever, SQL, Oracle, etc. You get the story. We design schemas, we design multiple databases across different companies, and then we said, this is my view of the world, this is your view of the world, and we shall not talk. We introduced a very, let's call it a centralized model of data, and we made sure that nobody talked to each other. And then we had unstructured data. We didn't have computing capabilities to parse, or language models at that time, to parse unstructured data. So we came up with just structuring them. This led to more semantic heterogeneity. I'm sure you're familiar with that term. the level of words and the meanings of the words that we keep producing onto the internet or onto our enterprises kept changing, increase in semantic heterogeneity, and that leads to the solutions that you heard today, which are essentially, let's develop a semantic layer. The problem with that approach, everybody needs to agree to the same standards. Everybody needs to agree to the same semantic grammar, if you will, or semantic ontologies to talk to each other. Till you do that, you don't have what one would call relevant, useful data. So first factor is companies who can figure that out faster, smarter, are the ones that are going to win. Let's look at the next factor. Does data ownership matter? I own this data. The fact that now they're learning models, the data, training data becomes more relevant and highly priced. I cannot solve for these two use cases unless I have training data. So hence, whoever owns that data also knows that, and they will put a price on that data. Now here comes the conundrum. I have a young niece, her name is Amira. You give her a toy, she says it's mine. Right? That's how we behave. I generated that data, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Because I have it, I have ownership of it, and hence it's mine. I will not give it to you. That becomes a question. The boundaries of the firm are evolving. The question for you is, are you going to share that data, sell that data, syndicate that data, or barter that data? If you have data today, somebody with their LLM needs that data, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to be in a centralized model where you control, and hence how do you produce value? Or you're willing to share the data, but what are the mechanisms of such sharing? Put a pin in that, we'll come back to that idea. Let's talk about LLMs. We're now at a stage where LLMs are learning models, essentially. Think of cognition developing learning models. They're getting more ubiquitous, they're getting more powerful, and some of them are getting to the stage where they can be more efficient even with not that much computing power. So today, it seems like large stacks of GPUs are needed to run language models, at least in some use cases, and that is an advantage today. But still, there are a lot of other models. If you look at Hugging Face, or you look at Mosaic ML, you'll find open source data models that can be run for as low of compute as on your iPhone. Point being, we are getting to a place that compute efficient LLMs will run on the edge of the network. What does that mean? That means LLMs will be more democratized. They will become eventually a commodity for most use cases. What that means, if it's available to everybody, including a small startup or a large company, then the small can look large, and the large might feel small. The scale at which they can compute becomes more efficient, and hence, they can produce the same relevant outcomes that a bigger company might. So what that means for competitive advantage. Remember the question, who will win? And then we come back a full circle to, where is my data? So now, let's layer in blockchain. Blockchain, if you remember, is just an efficient, secure, decentralized mechanism to share data across multiple participants. So I think this is where we're going. Because the need for data and training data would be so high, there'll be a price, a value put onto that. It already is happening. We will eventually get to data marketplaces in every domain, every use case, given the context. So take a certain context. I want to solve for a certain kind of breast cancer, and I need certain kind of medical training data for that purpose. There's only 5 databases on this planet that have it. How do we acquire it? Well, there's a value to it now. They're willing to part with it, or at least let you parse it, but it will be done on a blockchain-based data marketplace. Does that make sense? Same for other use cases. Pick a use case. Now, some use cases are, data might be ubiquitously available. You can scour the open web, but that would also become a question. So if you look at forums like Quora or Reddit, if you see the recent news, the community that runs Reddit said that they will not let APIs scour their data for free. Why? Because there is value to that. They have spent time, effort, energy creating that, so that becomes something that they now can sell. And they demand that, they understand that. So we are going to get to data marketplaces one way or another, and I believe to authenticate the veracity of the data that you are selling, you would need a blockchain-based attestation of that data. Even prior to giving access or selling it to somebody, you would need to prove that you have the data that you say that you have. And that's where blockchain-based and zero-knowledge-based proofs mechanism can actually assist in creating that marketplace. Now, moving on, if you look at the LLMs themselves, where do you think that is going? When Warren Buffett talks about AI as nuclear weapons, I agree with him in certain contexts. There's probably 0.1% of use cases that are that powerful. Typically, we talk about singularity or generative AI, general AI, which can destroy the universe, which can destroy the world that we know of it today. And yes, we need to put some guardrails, some boundaries to it. But those use cases are very far and few between. And yes, there should be more thoughtful ways of approaching those problems. Perhaps it is that once you're developing a new language model, a new learning model, you have to get it attested from some central agency, saying that it is safe to do so. That becomes a very difficult practical problem, but that is why we all need to come together to solve for it. For most use cases, 99% of use cases that are benign, compute is going to get cheaper and LLMs are going to get more ubiquitous. So you, along with your friend over there, could be running a big company just based out of the small compute capabilities that you have. So then who is going to win? Any thoughts, ideas? I think those who are going to win are going to look at these waves of technologies. Not just one, not look AI by itself, or blockchain, or in fact IoT by itself, but just the way in the movies, you have to look at synchronization of all the technologies that are here available now. If you look in history, every stage of technological evolution I mentioned for movies, you will find a litany of companies that did not adapt, who were hence disrupted. The shift from analog to digital is a famous one. But look at even cameras, from analog to digital cameras. Look at distribution from CDs to streaming, from CDs to streaming. The first phase being from VCR and videotapes to CDs. So those vantage points, those milestones in the course of evolution remind us the strategic choices that we need to make. If you look at the three technologies together, you might find the answers. I'm here to ask more questions than give you answers, so I hope I've done my job. Thank you. If you have time, I'm open to take some questions. Oh, just so we are closing, I've been teaching this course called Blockchain Strategy for Business Leaders. It's a very comprehensive 13-module course. We're about to release the on-demand version of it, video on demand, so you can just click and buy and do the whole course. So we've taught a number of executives on how to use blockchain for strategic purposes. And I think blockchain strategy is a term that has not been really understood. Blockchain has been understood more as a technology versus as a strategy. So my book, Profits in Chaos, Blockchain Strategy to Sow or Survive Disruption, is about to come out. We take historical lessons like we did today and apply them to today's world. and see what we can learn from it. There are a lot of frameworks and principles in this book. Any book you write about technology gets outdated pretty soon. So my intention is to write a book about frameworks and principles that stand the test of time. So if you're interested, just go to profitsinchaos.com and you can sign up for discounts and the early release. And let's keep the conversation going. You can find me on LinkedIn, or this is my link tree. You'll find a lot of my previous TEDx talks, lectures, articles, etc. Open to continue this conversation further with you guys. Thank you for being here.
I got one. A question?
Yes, please.
So when we talk about blockchain, often we highlight immutability, tamper evidence. We don't often talk about the fact that it can automate trust relationships without an intermediate party.
Yes.
Can you talk to your thoughts about, what does highlighting that aspect of it lead to in terms of future capabilities, future types of relationships, capabilities, things like that? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah. I mean, blockchain, you're right that in these types of conversations, we often don't end up there. But to me, blockchain is the trust machine. In fact, there is an MIT article that came out, I think 2016, that had that title, right? Blockchain, the trust machine. And that is the central value proposition, if you will, right? So the conversations I have in my courses with a lot of executives, they tell me, and there's some of them are here in this room, they would say, that's a cool story, Roop, but we already have these capabilities, we already do these things. Why do we need something called blockchain? And I say, yes, you already do them, but at what cost? Remember this very basic idea of, I have a system, I have a database, and then another company has a system, a database, another company has a system. I'm being simplistic, but the point is we have developed those multiple systems and then we have overlaid business processes on top of them. Some of them are automated, a lot of them are manual, and hence that creates the inefficiency that we live in. So what we end up doing is reconciling data back and forth. We say, okay, I don't know what data you have, I don't know what you sent me, let's reconcile. Every week, every month, every 3 hours, whatever the case is. And then we add humans on top of it. We say, okay, the computer did something, but you now go need to check what did the computer do and can we trust this or not, right? So essentially, we've created a lot of transaction cost in terms of compute, in terms of manual, human capital, etc., etc. Now, what does blockchain do? It's very simple. This is a shared wall. Once we agree on a transaction, it's published on the shared wall together, meaning you can see it, I can see it. There is no discrepancy on what this data is. There is no doubt, there is no confusion, there is no question. We must agree that this is the data, this is the state of transactions in this moment right now. Because of that, what you can do is you can simplify. You can take end-to-end business processes, which companies don't do because they are localized. They look at their company, perhaps they go to the next business partner. But if you have 28 business partners, you take them all and you put them all on a blockchain-based network and you say, when I publish the data, you all will have access to it. Or when any of us publishes it, we agree to the rules of what that means. Once we do, we all have this data on the shared wall. And that's what creates trust. That's what creates efficiency. That's what creates the lack of need to reconcile over and over again. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, please.
Do you have any thoughts on using blockchain strategies for loss prevention?
Define loss prevention. In which context? In which use case?
In the context of retail.
I look at that as authenticity of the product itself. So take a look at luxury goods, right? A luxury handbag, a Louis Vuitton handbag, or take your pick, or even an iPhone for that matter, or even a high-end Rolex watch, right? Or Swarovski crystals. Take any good. What is the authenticity of that product? How do we know that that is what we say it is? So there are a number of use cases in that regard. In fact, each one of these I mentioned is already a developed use case using blockchain. And what you really need to do, particularly in the case of diamonds, and you can apply the same principles in other products, from the mine, from where the raw material started, you need to start automatedly, not humanly, automatedly putting data onto the chain. So by the time it processes through the mines, through the cutters, through the wholesaler, comes on to your shop where you buy it, there's a barcode, you can scan it, tells you the provenance of that one diamond. It tells you how it was found, where it was found, and the process it took to get there. And hence, you as the consumer can then trust the veracity, the authenticity of such a product. And you can apply it to anything, really. Food, medicines. Think about counterfeit medicines. How deeply impactful would that be? So I think those use cases are in a lot of cases already there. I also think AI will help accelerate that phenomenon. It will help accelerate the authenticity, because let's take a case of a rare painting, right? How do we know that's a Van Gogh painting? We usually use, in the current world, we use some kind of an auditor, some expert to analyze the painting and say, okay, this is a real Van Gogh painting. And we usually trust them. So we have abdicated the trust to a third party. But what is now happening is we would use AI-based engines and AI-based tools to authenticate the first instance of this Van Gogh painting as being true. And then we will put a digital twin of that painting onto the chain, which we can then track the provenance of and the sale of as time goes on. Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Where does privacy fit in that
Oh,
role?
my friend, how much time do you have? I often ask the question to my friends in Silicon Valley, is privacy dead? Right? So if you're interested in that, watch my first TEDx talk, which is basically on identity and privacy. Right? Is privacy dead? Should we not expect it anymore? Who cares? Right? We've all given up on the idea. There's a leak and a hack every second day. I've lost track. Like, I used to talk about it, count it, record it. There's no point, is it? Because the basic model is broken. The model being a centralized model of storing data. We store a data, a company like Equifax stores the data in a centralized place. Are you from Equifax? Wonderful. We would love to have a conversation. You stored some data, which, by the way, just so you know, you had no legal right to. That's a separate conversation. But anyhow, you got my data. Somehow you did. And you got everybody else's data in this room. You stored it, but then you couldn't protect it. Why? Because he said, here's an X. That's where all the jewels lie. The thieves came and took all the jewels. And you said, oops, sorry, the thieves took the jewels. Cheers. I'm sorry, but nothing else to do. The entire model is broken. So what needs to happen is essentially self-sovereign identity, which is the consumer, the user, which is me and you. We choose who we want to share the data, what data do we want to share, and we need to have the ability to retract that data. It is for a particular use. Yes, if I want to apply for a mortgage at a financial company, sure, I should be able to give them my financial data. They should be able to use it for the purpose of giving me mortgage. But tomorrow, if I decide I don't want that house or I don't want to work with that company, I should be able to retract that use of the data forever. The company has no right on that data. So the question is, whose data is it? Right? And that's essentially my first TEDx talk. And I say, data that is organic and natural to you, you have every right to own it. This is financial data. Let's take the step further. Let's talk about your DNA or the print of your fingers or the pattern of your iris. Whose data is that? Let's go further. Let's talk about your hologram, your digital twin. Let's say you are Tom Cruise and there's a digital twin, or a past actor. Like, let's say you were Michael Jackson. Or take your favorite actor who's not alive anymore, actor or actress. And somebody claims their hologram. Well, nobody claimed it first, so it's mine. The question is, whose data is it? Right? So I think privacy-preserving technologies are possible. They are being implemented. If you look at identity-based blockchain solutions, there is a whole litany of them in the last 10, 12 years. But to me, the question is not even of technology. The question is the underlying business models. The business models of companies like our friends at Equifax and plenty others are designed on the fact that they can just take our data and use it and not give us anything in return. So unless we address the underlying business model, nothing will change. Yeah, regulatory regimes can change it, and you'll see the difference coming from places like Europe. So if you see, GDPR 2 coming, even in the United States, the California protection law, et cetera, but look at the lobbying against it, right? There's a give and take there. So you know the story there. Anyways, anybody else? More thought-provoking questions?
Nostr?
I can't hear you.
Nostr?
I can't hear you again.
Nostr? Nostr?
No.
Are you familiar?
Nostr. No, it doesn't ring a bell. Okay.
It's effectively key pair encryption applied to social media.
Sure, yes.
Distributed on a distributed network of nodes.
Right.
So that you can't be censorable, or if a node is shut down, that it's effectively copied and duplicated, so that this whole idea of canceling free speech
Right.
is impossible.
Right.
Well, we don't know yet.
Right. So the great point. And actually, this kind of is relevant to the talk as well. What is the model there? The existing model has been, if you look at how the web evolved, we had a layer called TCP/IP, right? We all assume that that's the protocol we're going to use to talk on. And then we developed layers of application on top of that. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram being those such applications. There are two things. One, we never included an idea of privacy or identity in that layer. And two, we actually never included the idea of money or money transfer, digital cash transfer in that layer. These are two basic inherent challenges that led to the world of Web 2.0. There are companies that came up and solved for those challenges, right? So if you look at what was eBay, eBay was the solution to that challenge. Not eBay, PayPal, right? To the money challenge. To the question you're asking or pointing out, there's a centralized model. That's what we lived on today, which is essentially these companies that have centralized solutions and centralized governance and centralized authority. So I'm neither for free speech or against free speech. That's not even the question. The question is, who is the decision maker? Who decides what is what, right? And in a centralized model, the world that we live in, that's what you get. We are moving towards, hopefully, to a more decentralized model. And we'll see how far we get to it. But if you see how AI is helping that picture, given the acceleration of AI and blockchain together, we can get to what some folks are calling decentralized AI. So computation at the edge of the networks, and decision-making and governance at the edge of the networks, which is what you're talking about, versus at a centralized authority, right? And that is the view. It might be a ubiquitous ideal, but we'll see where we get to it or not. Okay, anything else? Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. This has been fun.